on one side, Theodore Roosevelt on the other.
Teddy Roosevelt. So Sam, I mean, I think that is a very apt precedent for someone like yourself, right? He was maybe the last president who was kind of an outdoor frontier type. And, one of the most interesting things about you is you hiked the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada. And we covered this when I had a different podcast, the Food Startups podcast. And we talked about all the perseverance that you gained from there. I mean, sum it up in 20 seconds for listeners, that 5-month journey.
Oh, shit. Yeah, real quick, hiked from Mexico to Canada on the Pacific Crest Trail. It's 2,658 miles. Did it in about 5 months solo, and really just what it did was allow me to realize who I am, what I'm capable of enduring, and what I'm capable of accomplishing. And it's something that I use every single day, especially in my entrepreneurial journey.
Right. And I want to kind of pause it or make a statement right here. I've never done I've ran a 10K, I've done, 20-mile hikes, but all like 1 day or 2-day camping trips. And it is easy to feel intimidated by something like that. But trust me, while that is a very worthwhile thing that could be considered, and more power to you if you do it, mental toughness and stamina and perseverance can be developed without going to such an extreme measures. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but so anyone listening today, many of you may not have jobs, or at the very least, someone who doesn't have a job or who's lost their job recently or who's going to lose their job by the time we publish this episode. So we want to come away from this podcast with ideas around the power of rejection and kind of show that as part of the path to, forking your own road in uncharted waters. So Sam, I want to bring up, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you don't need to go on a hike like that. That happened to just be the channel in which I needed, or at least I chose, to gain that kind of knowledge. Everyone has their own journey. Everyone has their own metaphorical hike. It's more of learning to overcome adversity and being resilient, persistent, and resourceful in the moment up against challenges, so you can continue to move forward and progress.
Very well said. Now, I'm going to give listeners just a quick idea here about Vinder. It started out in a very small town, I think Port Townsend, Washington, like population 5. I'm joking, maybe it's 2,000, 3,000. But Sam started that out as, hey, people have their home gardens. What if they could sell to each other? And it's such a great way to connect a community. I think that was maybe my favorite thing about it, just the idea to, why not connect a community? You go over to a neighbor you've never met, and you buy cucumbers from them, and you can build a friendship. I think that's quite interesting. I think, dependence on less dependence on a globalized economy, which goes without saying is important to have that option at the very least. But that, you're in the small town of Washington. That was August 10th, 2017. So almost 3 years later, now you're in Austin, Texas. You've received funding, and you sent me this email a month ago. You said, hey, Matt, sorry for getting back to you. We just did a year's worth of sales in 6 days. Yeah. So I want to let you take the mic here. Tell me a little bit about, first, this rush right now. How were you successful? Or, most businesses have gone down. How have you guys thrived in the pandemic?
Yeah, we thrive by doubling down on community. That's what we do. It's what we've been built on. That's the whole reason Vinder even got started. You mentioned, Matt, that I had gotten started a few years ago. I made the first sale in 2016 on my bicycle, and you can see it actually over here. This wall is of our vendors, but that's a photo of me on the bicycle, and then with a bunch of produce in the back. And then here's the bike that I loaded up with a bunch of boxes. And then the rest are just our vendors and sellers, of which I've worked on every one of their farms. Community for us is core at what we do. And so we make it a point to go and work on the farm, pull weeds, plant, build greenhouses, and be a good neighbor. That's core value number 2 of Vinder, is be a good neighbor. You mentioned.
Okay, so Sam, sorry, I just want to define for the audience, doubling down on community in Austin during the pandemic. You mentioned helping people with farming, but it seems like you also, I just want to make sure listeners get the full spectrum of what you've done. I mean, you've all started working with restaurants who are going through an incredibly difficult time and helping them, sell food. Can you tell us about kind of how the changes you made by doubling down on community?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was trying to figure out what were the biggest pain points the community is having. A lot of it when it comes to local producers is distribution and how they can get their products out to the public. And with COVID, we saw a rapid decline in farmers market attendance, right? It's an outside area of a gathering of more than 50 people or more than 10 with an easy ability for this virus to spread. And so you see a reduction of attendance at local farmers markets, which is a major direct to consumer channel for local farmers, ranchers, bakers, and small producers. The other major channel, which is actually the majority of their sales for local producers, is restaurants, B2B. And so when COVID hit, which shut down restaurants, that shut down 90% of the sales channels for most local food producers. Yeah, fucking crazy. And so it was more of, look, this thing was built on community. This thing was built by our neighbors and by our local producers. What can we do? They are in need. I know a lot of them are friends of mine that I know were on the verge of bankruptcy. And I'm sitting here with a platform that connects local producers to local consumers thinking, how can we help? What is it that we can do? And how do we look at our food system at a much larger scale in a completely different lens, right? And that's when I started looking at restaurants and thinking, look how scattered and decentralized they are throughout the city, right? They also can become points of distribution for grocery. They have access to wholesale distributors that are buying product at a lower cost that they can rebundle and then sell direct to consumer. And so it goes, my thought was, well, let's provide that as a solution, right? I didn't know if it would work or not. It was, hey, I'm here to help. Here's this idea, and you can sell it through our platform. We'll take care of the delivery. And it's how can we get your product, right, and your brand into the hands of the consumers. It's a way that the local shop owners can stay open. And unlike Grubhub or DoorDash or Uber Eats that charge the restaurants 20 to 30%, which is fucking egregious right now, especially with what they're having to go through. We don't charge them, right? So it's free for our local community sellers to sign up and sell direct to consumer. And we looked at just how can we look at our food system different and what can we do to help? Purely it.
And Sam, just to clarify something, Vinder does. So is Vinder just doing this as a service, or how are they are they not monetizing at all, or how is it sustainable to do that without charging them?
We don't charge the sellers. We charge the customers a small.
Just the customers. Okay.
Yeah, just the customers a small convenience fee, and it includes the delivery. So it allows us to keep the restaurants open and allow food production to exist without price gouging them and still allowing it to be delivered to your house at a low cost.
That's amazing. Now, okay, so you've been rejected many times, and there's different types of rejection, right? Because there can be, you go up to a pretty girl at a coffee shop and she's like, oh, no, get away from me. That's a form of rejection, right? And that's good, like social. Negotiating, asking for a discount can be a form of rejection. It can also be the form of launching a business, which I think you and I both have experience with, that doesn't catch up. The market rejects it. It says, you know what, for whatever reason, maybe it's not being explained well, but we don't need this. There is a term called rejection therapy, and it's usually more applied socially, but I'm going to read it here. It's a social self-help game created by Jason Comely, where being rejected by another person or group is the sole winning condition. And I think he talks about just getting rejected once a day and how that's really good to, for your self-esteem and your perseverance. Talk to us about the trail. I'm gonna say the trail, but well, I guess maybe the Pacific Crest Trail. That's why it's in my mind. But the types of rejections you've gotten, you continue to get, and the way that you view them.
Yeah, I see rejections, and you can think of. I lean on. What's his name? Chris Voss. Chris
Okay.
Voss has never split the difference. The U.S.'s #1 FBI hostage negotiator teaches negotiation practices. And it's that rejection is really just an opportunity or a window into acceptance, right? So why are you being rejected? They said no, but find out why and then solve that, right? And you get from a no to a yes. Once they say no, that's fine. They're in the position of control and power, and that's cool. It's more of why is it a no, right? And how can you turn that no to a yes? I've been rejected. I mean, social rejection is the easiest one, the one most people are common with, or
Right.
they know of, right? Whether you're being rejected from girl, guy, whomever it might be. Then the others are like, I've been rejected by over 400 investors. That doesn't dissuade me. It's just part of it, right? You got to get rejected. No one's going to just say yes every time you pitch them. And the more you get rejected, the best way to do it is say, okay, why? Okay, why? What is it specifically that you don't like or are concerned about within this model or idea or whatever? And what that does is it exposes the holes in your plans that allows you to then go back, iterate, and repair and fix or fill in that you may not have actually thought about. So the more rejection, I think, the better. And it allows you to also just kind of go, okay, no, I'm not going to let that ruin my day or stop me from going to get whatever it is I'm trying to get, right? One investor who rejects you is fine. They may not be the right investor, right? Like they may not know anything about your market. They may have never done anything in your field or your industry. So of course they're going to reject because they just aren't comfortable with it. That's fine. Restaurants that don't want to get involved. When I say, hey, we have this platform, this is what we're doing, and they go, no. Or they don't say that exactly, no, but they're not interested.
Yeah.
And to me, that's fine. That's fine too. All we're trying to do is provide an extra service and help. If they don't want it, that's fine. Everyone's got their own way of doing it. I don't think rejection should stop anybody from going after what they're truly passionate about.
And let me add something, context. I'm going to keep giving context to listeners. I think multiple, but you have at least one or placed in pitch competitions. Pitch competitions are where you get in front of investors and kind of like a Shark Tank thing where they judge you on how well your pitch is. So anyone listening, it's impossible not to have people reject your idea, whether or not it's successful. So I think that's important to understand.
Yeah, we won. Here's an interesting one. We got last place in the Silicon Valley Business Plan competition in 2015, and then in 2016, I took first place.
The same competition.
Same competition.
What did you change?
I changed the business. Vinder was originally a plant identification app that would allow you to take a photo, identify the plant, and you could have it, mailed to you. And they tore me apart. And then the next year, I iterated. I came back with Neighbor Made Foods and took first place. We placed.
Sorry, I just got to add one thing. I can see you on this long 5-month trek, looking at all these plants, and like you're by yourself. Hey, there's got to be an app for this, right? I'm guessing the idea came on that walk.
Yeah, that was exactly it. But then I got torn apart, and then listened and tried again. Right, with a bicycle and my neighbor's veggies, and then came back and took first place. We placed top 15 in the world for agricultural supply chain innovation, beating out 600 companies from 19 countries. So we've placed high, if not won, pitch competitions. I still get rejected all the time. It doesn't matter. It's more of, does it fit that person? Investors are people. VC firms are just a group of people, but they have this process, they have this vision, they know what they're looking for, and you just got to fit to that. You got to know who your audience is.
Okay. Now, so far I think we've done a good job showing the theme that taking a risk and getting rejections. Here's a constructive way to look at rejection. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this path is difficult, right? And there's lots of ups and downs. Can you share some of your recent, just sacrifices you've had to make or hard times you've dealt with in the journey of Vinder?
Yeah, and fundraising is not easy by any means. It is the worst part of the whole thing. It's my least favorite part. Asking for money is never fun. And there's always ups and downs. You could always look for more, right? Companies can always have more, and every company is pretty much raising, right? So you have all these investors just bombarded, and it takes time. And with that, you start running out of runway, right? Because you can't raise capital fast enough, or you may not be able to. So there's a lot of financial stresses that go into that make you double guess yourself. At one point, we were running solo. I mean, and we had just come out of an accelerator, one of the top 15 in the world, Mass Challenge, here in Austin. They're top 15 according to Entrepreneur Magazine. And we had just graduated from that, hadn't received any funding, right? So we're thinking, yes, we just got out of this accelerator, right? I had been thinking YC in my mind. I'm thinking, all right, Y Combinator, this is going to be great. Demo day, pitch, bring on investments. Fuck no, that's not how it happened. It was more of like, here's this demo day. Okay, cool, that's kind of an idea. And then you press for investments to get those meetings, and there's no follow-up. So there's rejections, or you're too early, or they say they want one metric, you tell them they want another, they lead you on. It's just a time burn, right? Where over time I started running out of runway. We started running out of capital. And I have a team, at the time I had a team of 4. And this was getting really down to it. And I had to make that this decision of like, look, do we start letting people go and really make the development and progress of the app constrained? Or what are alternatives that I can do to keep us moving forward? The alternative I decided to do was move out of my place. I moved into my van. I don't have a big van. It's a Nissan NV200. So if anyone who knows that, it's like a small Amazon delivery van.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I moved into my van with all my boxes in it and a bicycle. And I moved into a Walmart parking lot. And if you're in Austin, it's under the one off 360 and Mopac. And it's right on the corner there. And I lived in that Walmart parking lot, I guess homeless for 4 or 5 months. To make sure that my guys got paid and to make sure that we could progress with the app. That, I don't know how many people would do that. It was not comfortable. My shoulders, I would sleep like this next to a bicycle with a backpacking backpack over my face. And I'm 5'10", so I'm not the tallest guy, but I barely fit in the back of that van. And it was just uncomfortable, but I slept in it every day. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I hit the gym. I made sure I had my routine. I showered. I ate. It was more of, what is it? Truly, it's temporary, right? Life's pretty long. Most pains and shortcomings are temporary. They're just short for a short amount of time. So my thought was like, look, yeah, I'm homeless, living in my van, and a CEO of a company.
CEO hobo.
Yeah, exactly. But we just kept going. I kept progressing, moving forward. It's only temporary. I know I can get through this. I know we're going to eventually do it. And eventually we did. I raised around and I moved out of my van and started going from there. It's not easy. A lot of times I think it's equivalent to waking up and just getting kicked in the dick in the morning, and like, that's your alarm. Welcome, good morning. And then you're like, great, thanks for that. I'm just going to get going with my day, from that, co-founder disputes, employee disputes, management, human resources, all of which I didn't know of because I was I'm a first-time CEO. So it's, how do you adjust to that while handling all these personal issues of like living in a van and dealing with financial burdens? It sucks, but man, I wouldn't change it for anything. I love it. I love the highs and lows, because every high that you have in business far outweighs the lows. Doesn't matter, even if, and the funny thing is the highs in business are so much shorter than the lows.
Yeah. You don't celebrate as long as you think you would. And you often like, Terry's like, hey, I should celebrate this. I achieved this goal.
They're small things. And I don't want to focus on the hike because we talked about that in the previous episode. So for anyone that wants to hear about it, I'll just tune into the Food Startups podcast so you can hear that. You know, I was going over mountaintops and peaks and things like that, and you have this giant buildup to get to the highest point.
Right.
It is just fuck tons of work coming from the lowest areas of the valley up to the high point and the crest, where you see farther than you ever have, and you see the most glorious, magnificent, beautiful aspects. And all that hard work, the pain in the legs, the aches, they all disappear. They all melt away. But then you got to come down that mountain, and then it's just downhill, right? And it's
literally downhill.
It's literally downhill. And I can see that kind of typically. You have these ebbs and flows, right? These valleys and peaks. But typically, they're always progressing a little higher, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to think about that.
Sam, I got to interject with a couple comments and questions here. One, have you thought about living out of a van? It's having a gym membership is great, right? Because not only do you get the endorphins from starting the day, but you get to shower. Now with gyms closed, that would have been a little bit more difficult. Maybe I guess you would have had to shower at a friend's place and you would have figured it out. But living out of a van now is even more difficult if you can't have a gym membership.
So if you are living out of your van now, and if I were to do it again, right, to live out of my van, also those little issues, they might seem like a lot because they're in your face. Yeah. Typically, there's small solutions to those problems that allow you to move past them very, very quickly, right? So it's don't get overwhelmed. Super, super easy to get overwhelmed. Like incredibly. Stay focused. Okay, if showering is your one thing, figure out where you can take a shower. Right? That's it. Working out, you can work out outside. Yeah, totally. Gyms are closed. I use resistance bands. I do push-ups. I run, sit up. You can figure out a way to get endorphins. It's small things like that that allow you to consistently push forward and progress, right? Like for me, exercise was fundamental for me to keep going forward. When I'm living out of my van, I needed those endorphins. I needed something to be like, look, you're going to feel good, right? Force those into yourself.
And Sam, I'd like to mention something we spoke maybe, I think 2 weeks ago or maybe last week. And okay, so Vinder has evolved just like any startup, right? You've pivoted quite a few times. And so now you're helping the restaurants, but you know, at the core, and this, you can still do this today on the app, local producers, you can grow a garden. Let's say someone listening, I know it's in Austin right now, but I expect Vinder to, you know, expand to other cities. I'm sure it will. You know, you grow a bunch of cucumbers or tomatoes, and you have excess. So being able to sell them to, you know, to your neighbors in the town or city where you are, right? It's an amazing service, but now more than ever, people are looking for ways to make money. And you mentioned something along the lines of, at least in Austin, and I'm sure it's about the same, but it maybe changes, you know, from county or state to state. But the whole idea of, hey, why not, if you have a little bit of space, why not take your personal garden and get on Vinder if you're in Austin right now, and maybe you can do up to $45,000, $50,000 worth of produce sales as an independent person through your application, which is, you know, that's not chump change, $40,000 or $50,000.
No, it's not. That is a legit small business, right? That at least validates that your product is ready for expansion. It's market validation. That falls under cottage food law. And cottage food law is available in all 50 states. It's an old law. Funny thing, in the state of Minnesota, it is your state constitutional right to sell produce that is grown in your garden. But it's not just restricted to produce. It's baked goods, it's pickled goods, it's canned goods.
A lemonade stand? the cliche
Not
lemonade stand?
the lemonade stand. It can't be anything refrigerated. It's
Ah,
mainly
okay.
shelf stable. The
Gotcha.
law varies state to state. So that does depend. If you are looking into it, look up your own individual state for your cottage food law. The cap that you're allowed to sell also varies state by state, and so does the products. In the state of Texas, you can sell up to $50,000 out of your home kitchen without a business license or FDA inspection. However, you do need a food handler certificate to be verified. And so that allows you to know all the food safety laws in preparation to make those goods to sell direct to consumer. But you can bake breads, you can make jams, honey, you can sell eggs, you can do pickles and kimchi's. There's quite a wide variety.
I would expect and again, I don't want to demonize globalization. It's done many things for us. Looking at this awesome microphone I'm using, I mean, there's so many things, but obviously having the local option, right? It's not pro or anti-local or pro or anti-globalization, but I think there's a need for the local option. I only expect that to increase. So I think anyone listening saying, hey, and especially you may not, maybe, running a large home garden under cottage law is not your long-term goal, but if you work it as like a side business to get you through this and you work in a completely different industry while that recovers, what a great transitionary, job or project to have to bring in some additional income.
Yeah, and if gardens aren't your thing, you don't have to do a garden. You can bake bread. I mean, I know gardens, right. A lot of people, when they think about food production and they think of produce production specifically, they're like, oh man, shit, that takes a long time. It's a lot of work. I got to remember to water. I got to keep up on it. I got to weed. And most stuff can take 60 to 90 days until it fruits, and then you can harvest. Kind of a long one. You could do 30 days. You could do radishes. You could do greens. You could do things like that. A lot of that turnover, though, is mainly sold to restaurants. So, figure out, you got to know your customer base. What I would do is just start making bread. You can make it within a day, and it's super cheap. One loaf of bread might cost you 75 cents to make, but you can sell it for between $6 and $14 a loaf.
Wow.
Yeah. I only know a couple people selling bread at 14 a loaf. How many sales they're doing, they're doing them both through Vinder and other channels. So
let's say $6 or $7, right? At the lower end, still really good, great margin, especially in food. Anyone who's worked in food knows that's a very good margin. Incredible.
Local, and it's all fresh made, right?
Yeah.
And you can sit in your kitchen and have a beer and make bread and sell it, and then put some of that dough in your pocket,
Yeah, and you could get a bread machine off Amazon Prime. You have it tomorrow. You could start tomorrow and do it. And I think that's really powerful. Uber and Airbnb if you have a car or a spare bedroom, but just looking at what resources do I have right now? What can I work with and start generating some immediate capital? I think that's a really interesting thing about the Vinder platform.
And almost immediately, think about the environment. People laugh at me all the time which I'm used to, because fuck them.
Yeah.
When I tell people, like, look, they're looking for jobs, and I say bake bread, and they think that's super funny, and they don't do it. I'm like, well, look at your grocery stores. There's no bread on the shelves. Bread is a staple of the diet. It's something people buy weekly, and it's very easy to make, but it takes time, and most people don't know how to bake bread, are scared to learn, and are then scared to try it and sell it. But people are very forgiving, and bread, you only need I don't think it takes long to actually learn. You make a few loaves, you fail the first couple, it costs you $1.50. And then you make your third one, it's a good loaf, you eat it, you enjoy it, you make another, you sell it, you make all your money back within one loaf.
Yeah. Now, two things I'd like to add. I keep thinking about the listener here. We talked about fundraising, and in a lot of industries, it's either a requirement or it makes it much easier. But you don't like this whole bread thing is something you can do without raising funds. And I think we get lost in the kind of the venture capital world. And you said it's my least favorite thing to do, but understanding that there's certain types of businesses that can be started bootstrapping without raising funds. And especially now where it's might be even, or it's going to be probably overall much more difficult to raise funds. Don't let that stop you. I think there's this entrepreneurship ideal that you have to raise funds, and that's not correct. And that's another thing that stops people from starting, like, oh, I have to go raise money from investors.
No, not at all. I started this on a bicycle for $18.58. You know, I didn't raise capital for 2 years,
Right.
and just self-funded. I was living off $200 a month before I got capital, and for bread, and I was making like 80 cents on an order. So for people that are at home, you can just spend 20 bucks and get your whole thing set up and start making up to 50,000.
You weren't even close to minimum wage, man.
Oh no, I didn't. No, not at all. But it's not about the money for me. I don't give a shit about the money.
You don't give a shit about the money.
No, that's not why I do this. That's not why I wake up. That's not why I lived in my van, during winter. No, I do this because of, it's amazing. The ability for the community to feed itself and to keep money local, right? And empower our local food producers while creating side incomes and transforming our entire food system, not only for the nation, but potentially for countries around the world, that allows neighbors to help feed neighbors. That's why I do it.
Gotcha.
That's it.
Now, let me add something. I think that I do feel that money is demonized. Like I think of money as a tool. And so, you don't necessarily need to, how should I put this? It's okay to want to make a lot of money, right? For anyone listening. But you said that keeping money local. Can you talk a little bit more about keeping money local and why that matters?
Yeah, so by spending money locally, you actually increase the worth of the dollar, at least here in Austin, by 3 times, right? Because that money is then going to, from you locally to another local business, who's then spending it at another local business, right?
Gotcha.
And so it actually magnifies the value of that capital. The other aspect of it is you want to help those that are local and that are just having a small shop like yours, right? If I'd rather spend my money going to, let's say, Safeway to buy my tomatoes, I'm probably going to spend maybe $2 on those tomatoes. I don't know who the farmer is. I don't know where the farm is. I don't know where the farm is. I don't know who the farmer is. I might know the country of which it comes from. And Matt, you know all about this, right?
Yeah.
In food exporting and importing. You don't know how that food was grown, or the nutrients or any fertilizers, insecticides, pesticides that might be used. And you know that, or maybe the most consumers don't know, is that the majority of the money that you're spending is not going to the farmer, it's going to the distributor. The average American farmer makes 16 cents on the dollar. Let that sink in. That's a lot. Like, that's not a lot. There's 84 cents going to a distributor, all right, along the supply chain.
Yeah.
So
I mean, obviously the distributor is adding, just to be fair, they are adding some value because they're consolidating and then making the deliveries. But your point still stands. I just didn't want to oversimplify it. I also, and Sam, I want to talk about peer-to-peer in general. So, okay, so Uber is probably the most well-known example with ride sharing. You take your car, turn into it. Vinder, for produce, Airbnb for your house. But peer-to-peer is so powerful. I look at healthcare, and we have a guest coming on the kind of telemedicine, being able to call a doctor, physical or I guess a psychologist or counselor for mental health from your phone, and get immediate help. And if necessary, they might tell you have to go see a local doctor. I do understand there's limitations on the video chat, and I'm excited to bring that person on. But I think this mentality of the peer-to-peer, these supply chains and medicine and healthcare gets more and more expensive every year, and we get less and less generally. So I think this concept you have, someone listening, maybe vegetables or baking bread is your thing. Maybe you're more just into eating vegetables, eating bread, which I'm cool with. But and you don't want to be in food. That's fine. But peer-to-peer can be applied to so many things.
Yeah, it's something that is innate in the human species, I believe, right? The way that our current system is set up is not that old. maybe 100 years, a little over 100 years. As far as definitely when it comes to food supply chain, we try to maximize the efficiency by reducing the number of processing plants and creating economies of scale. And clearly right now you can see that that doesn't work, right? When you have some major emergency, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Look back on most of human history, it was all local, right? For the most part, there was the Silk Road, there was all that giant global, trade, even, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years ago. But the majority of it was local.
Right.
So I really see this as a return back to our more traditional roots using 21st century technology.
Oh, wow. Man, you were, I don't know if this is because you're pitching, but you're very eloquent the way you describe these things. And I guess maybe you've pitched so many times, it helps you summarize it very clearly, because that was really impressive, Sam. It's exactly right. And the majority, keyword majority, right? And, you're not going to, well, I don't want to say you can't, but it's much harder and more expensive to cultivate sugar in North Dakota, right? You still want your coffee from Ethiopia, Vietnam, and Colombia, but moving the majority over, I think that's the key. Kind of less global dependence, right?
Yeah, it's not getting rid of it at all. We need it. We have always had it. The Chinese were doing trade in the 1400s, right? We're sailing ships around the world. Marco Polo, the Silk Trade. I mean, think about it. There are always and have always been aspects of import export of various goods, but the majority of what's eaten, or at least consumed, whatever that might be, is produced locally, and that's what really most efficiently and effectively works in the long term.
Sam, this has been a great interview. I can just feel it, and I'm so excited to publish it probably Thursday. I love speaking with you, but I wonder, was there anything that I should have asked you or that I could have asked you that I didn't, that you'd like to speak about?
Right now, outside of Vinder, it's not really my whole focus. Yeah, I started Vinder, and Vinder is my company and my baby and my fucking life. There's nothing I would have really have you ask about, but it's more of, if I can emphasize to anyone listening, is to buy local. Doesn't have to be through Vinder. Go to a farmer's market, get to know the people that are in your community making food. Too often do we take farmers for granted. We always think of them as like a very poor population that just works their ass off. Without them, we wouldn't have community. We wouldn't eat, right? They are the bedrock to all societies.
Yeah.
We need to know them more. We need to support them more. We need to recognize them more. And so if there's anything I'd like to emphasize with anyone listening, it's to find out who your local producers are, get to know them, and buy from them.
What a great message to end with. Sam, Lily, check out Vinder in Austin now. Here's a question. Most people watching, and there'll be some, but most people watching are not in Austin. Can you tell us a little bit about the national expansion plans?
Yeah, so we are in over 120 cities across the nation. If it is something you'd like to be a part of, you can just download the app and you can find
120 cities, okay. And that can all be found on Vinder.com.
Vinder.com, you can find our landing page, and then you can download the app. It's available on iOS and Android. If you're outside of Austin, you'd figure out delivery and distribution between you and the seller, which is super cool, which is why we wanted to create that relationship. It's not about Vinder, it's about the relationship between you and your local food producer.
And what are some of the top cities outside of Austin right now?
Oh, Seattle, San Diego, Atlanta. Yeah, there's quite a few popping up.
Okay, well, everyone listening, please subscribe, share. Let's get this message about Vinder out. Because I realize it's much, Austin is where it's strongest, but let's get this message out in other cities, because it's just great to know that this option exists, whether or not you take advantage of it as a producer or consumer, or sharing it with someone that you think will be interested, even if it's not your cup of tea. Sam, thank you so much for coming on. This was an amazing conversation. And we Crazy Calm, or here in Austin, we're excited to start selling on the platform as well.
Yeah, we're excited. We've been seeing, looking at your product. I'm excited to get it out. I'm excited to try it. I'm going to buy some as well. One thing I want to touch on right before we leave is that we talked about fundraising.
Yeah.
Right. One thing I'd like to mention is that if anyone out there is looking at equity crowdfunding as a way to raise capital outside of your traditional VC or angel investment, it's something I would recommend. We did it. We raised over $160,000 through an equity crowdfunding campaign, which is phenomenal. My whole thought was, hey, I want to double down on community, so why not give them the ability to own the system that they've helped create, right? And it actually turned us into what I believe is the world's first high-tech food co-op. So Vinder is a user-owned and operated company.
Let me clarify something, because I think people hear crowdfunding, and for good reason, because they've done really well. They think of Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but this was different. And so usually with Kickstarter, again, very cool concept. Maybe it's like the backpack that you can travel with that can't be broken into with a knife. But by funding it, you receive a discount on the product they produce. But this is different. In this case, they're receiving equity in Vinder, the company, correct?
They become owners.
Yeah.
Become owners. I have phone calls and video meetings with my investors, and I've got over 370 of them.
Amazing.
I make sure to have one-on-one meetings, and I sit down and I have those meetings, and I let them get to know, like, that we're in this together. Those of you, though, that are looking to do equity crowdfunding as a potential way to raise capital, right? If you don't have the connections to VCs or angels, and that's fine. I didn't. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a firefighter. Fuck did I know about raising capital, right?
Right.
It's a long shot when it comes to that, and it's also a signal to potential future investors as well as the market itself. So it's not guaranteed. It takes a whole lot of work.
Totally.
At one point, I stood next to the freeway with a sign that said "Buy shares of Vinder," and I was selling it to people in their cars. So if you're thinking about doing it, understand it's not a guarantee, and it can have a potential to backfire.
Okay. I appreciate those disclaimers. We should add that. And I mean, I think we talked about a lot of the hardships that come with this, that, innovation and rejection therapy are not easy. But yeah, that's a great point, that crowdfunding, sometimes it can be very difficult, and it takes a heck of a lot of work in order to do that. You just like anything, you don't just put it up on the internet and the money comes in, unless you're Joe Rogan or Elon Musk or something. Yeah, that's not going to happen, even with the best idea and execution. But okay, Sam, fantastic. Again, check out Vinder, download the app, 120 cities across the United States.